Will everyone please silence your cell phones? Do that. And as a reminder, in case it's needed, the restrooms are located out the door to your right. Those are the two restrooms that are open. The restrooms in the main hallway are locked this morning, or this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded and will be on both the Garish and the Lyon Townships websites next week. And we'd like to thank the Higgins Lake Foundation for making those arrangements to have it recorded. We want to thank the foundation for doing that. When you entered the building today, there were sign-in sheets to record your attendance. If you did not sign in, please do so when you exit the auditorium. Also, there were 3x5 cards being passed out for you to write your questions resulting from today's presentation and from the trifold handout that was also available in the lobby. Following the presentation, we'll be taking a short break to collect your question cards, and they will be placed in the box in the front of the stage, right there. The questions will be randomly drawn from the question box and will be answered by our panel members. Every question deserves the courtesy and the respect from you, the audience. Please do not raise your hand because you will not be recognized, as this will slow the process for getting everyone's questions being submitted today. You can see there's a lot of people here today, and a lot of people are submitting questions, so we need to get through those today, everyone, if possible. I have the luxury this afternoon of asking the first question this afternoon, and it's a simple question. Why are you attending this presentation this afternoon? Most everyone here wants to know, what is the sewer going to cost me? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting to that. Thank you. What is the sewer going to cost me? In the presentation, we promised that we would answer that question at our next presentation, and so we're here today to share the individual cost and answer other questions as well. I can't disagree with the question, however, but I know the real answer to my question, why are you attending this presentation this afternoon? It's because we all love Higgins Lake. Each one of us wants to preserve and protect the lake that is referred to as the 10th most beautiful lake in the world. We do not live here because of the availability of great shopping, fine dining, concerts, plays, and live entertainment. One of our residents told me, it's all about the lake. It's all about the lake, and I believe he's right. So welcome. How are we doing? We have a technical issue here. No? Is there a teenager in the house?
I'm the youngest one here.
Well, let me continue with a couple of things I can do now. I'd like to introduce the Garish Lyon Utility Authority Board. I'm Dave Udy. I'm from Garish Township. We have David Hall. David Hall is he represents both townships. He's the member at large. Lisa Talgetsky from Garish Township is one of our board members. Bill Lamb is also a board member. Eric Carlson from Lyon Township is a member. Tom Metcalf from Lyon Township is a member, and Jerry McKenna is a township member as well. The township boards, the board members are myself, Dave Udy from Garish Township, Kathleen Patchen from Garish Township, Lisa Talgetsky from Garish Township, and Terry Newton and Mary Jo Oppie are also from Garish Township. The Lyon Township Board is Doug Schnell, Julie Tatro, Eric Carlson, Lynette Tomac, and Sue Greer. And I believe most of those board members are with us today, although a couple of them couldn't make it. I know Lisa's on vacation down in Florida, hopefully enjoying some nice weather. Are we back on track? Okay. Yep, go ahead. That video, minus the sound, unfortunately, was provided by the Higgins Lake Foundation, and we'd like to thank them for their participation here with that this morning as well. Okay, here's the agenda for today. We've done some introductions. We're going to talk about Higgins Lake water quality from Dr. Luttington. Central Michigan Health District is here. We're going to have a project overview and a grant process. The project will review the project financing, the user costs, and then we'll have written questions and answers. I want to remind everybody that you got your 3x5 cards to write your questions down. You don't have to come up and put them in the box yourself. At the end of the presentations, we'll pause for a couple of minutes to allow some of our ushers, so to speak, go through the audience, and we'll collect your questions. We'll put them in the box, and then we'll pull them out randomly. And like I said, we will try to answer everyone's question here this afternoon. Oh, questions and comments also. Okay, we've already done that. The GLUA, public outreach for the program to date. Let's see, back in 2018, we opened with a public meeting over at the Garrish at Lyon Township. We developed a feasibility study in May through October of 2019. Public information number 1 was in October of 2019. Information has been posted on the township's websites from October 19th to present. Townships formed the utility authority in spring of 2021. There have been 14 Garrish Line Utility Authority public board meetings from June to October of 2021. Presentations to local groups, the HLPOA, the Foundation, the Higgins Lake Land Conservancy, Roscommon County Commissioners. I've spoken at the Roscommon Rotary Club, the Roscommon Chamber of Commerce. Public information number 2 was held in October of 2021, and public information meeting today in October of 2021. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker today. He's Dr. Mark Luttington. Pardon me? Where's he at? He's coming. There he is. Dr. Luttington is the former Associate Dean of the Graduate School at Grand Valley State University. He is also Professor of Biology and Associate Research Scientist with the Annis Water Resources Institute. He has worked on Michigan lakes for more than 40 years and has been working with the Higgins Lake Foundation with programs for the past 5 years. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Mark Luttington.
Thanks, David. Having Dave say that I've been working on lakes for 40 years makes me sound really old, but I like to think I started when I was 10. So hopefully it's not quite that bad. So as David said, I've been working on the lake, on Higgins Lake for several years now, and I think some of you have probably seen some of my presentations at the library regarding the current status of Higgins Lake. And I've always commented that it's the nutrients that are really a key factor in what's the direction or the trend that Higgins Lake is on at this point, based on the data that we've collected and data that was collected over several decades now. So I'm not going to focus on that today, since I think probably everybody sort of has a sense of that. Really, the key to this now is where are the nutrients coming from that are driving these changes in Higgins Lake that we've been seeing for the last 10 years or so. Bottom line is nutrient concentrations in the groundwater in the region have been increasing since the mid-90s. Fortunately, there was a study in the early 80s that identified that nutrients were still relatively low. Then starting in the 90s, we started to see this increase in nutrient concentrations, and clearly in the groundwater. study that was done in 2014 by a group at Michigan State, and then repeated again in 2018, has shown that even in the last 4 to 6 years, nutrient load in the groundwater has increased in that relatively short time period. So the tall bar there on the figures from July 2018, the green bars are from 2014. So even in that short time period, that short time frame, you can see that there's an increase in nutrients occurring relatively rapidly now. One of the reasons that we've seen this increase in nutrients is the geology of the region. It's glacial geology. It's dominated by sands and gravels, and so groundwater moves through that geology very easily, as do the nutrients. I've just put in a figure that shows the local surface geology of the region. And if I zoom in, and if you could see the writing on the figure on the diagram, you'd realize that basically all this shows is the dominant soil type in the region is sand, several different types of sand. That becomes important because the sand we have in this region is relatively coarse, and it doesn't bind nutrients like it does in some other areas if there's other constituents in the soil. So these types of soils make it ideal for groundwater movement and for transport of nutrients in the groundwater. If we add the geology together with precipitation, this region gets a relatively large amount of precipitation and rainfall and snow. That same study in 2014 by Michigan State estimated that average groundwater flow is above 1 foot per day, which is identified by the USGS as high groundwater flow. They found also the maximum groundwater flow of over 2.5 meters. That's over 6 feet a day. So the flow of groundwater in the system is very, very high compared to a lot of other regions in the state, and it's because of the geology. The Michigan State folks put together this flow map. Each one of those yellow lines shows the direction of flow from upland to downslope. The red lines are the level of groundwater around the region. Basically, it shows, as we all know, water flows downhill. This identifies where that downhill slope is, and each one of those yellow dots is where they had a water sampling unit that determined the rate of flow. That's how they came up with that estimate of between a foot to 6 feet of groundwater flow. So these lines start fairly far back because of that hydrogeology. So it really encapsulates or incorporates a lot of the entire region, showing that groundwater flows from those higher regions to the edges of the lake, the shallow parts of the lake. So then the question becomes, where are the nutrients coming from that get into the groundwater and are carried into Higgins Lake? And the bottom line is it's the septic systems around the lake. There's very little agriculture in the watershed, little if none. And so the primary source, just by deduction, is it has to be coming from the septic systems that are a constant source of nutrients to the system. It's a continual delivery system now based on the measurements that Michigan State has done. A septic system, oftentimes we talk about the issue is when septic systems fail, but actually it's because of the way even a functioning septic system works. Nutrients, the nitrogen and phosphorus, is delivered to the drainage field through the discharge pipes connected to the tank. And that's where those nutrients come from, is through the drainage field. Because of the geology and because of the high precipitation in the region, as those nutrients move down through the soils, the geology, into the groundwater, they get transported then downslope towards the lake. So it doesn't have to be a failing septic system to contribute to the problem. It's pretty much all septic systems. This is not unique to Higgins Lake. A study done by another group at MSU, a woman named Joan Rose, who's a researcher there, identified very large, widespread issues in the state with relationship to the effects of septic systems on our groundwater, which is then being translated into issues for our surface water as well. So this is not just an issue for Higgins, but for a lot of the aquatic ecosystems around the state. So as I mentioned, even functioning septic tanks are contributing nutrients to the groundwater, that groundwater flow, delivering those nutrients to the lake. So bottom line is, given the density of housing around the lake, all of those septic systems are delivering nutrients to the lake. It's not just the failing septic systems that we need to be concerned about. So we take all this together, the geology, very, very porous soils, high groundwater flow, and septic systems that provide a constant source of nutrients to the groundwater to be transported to the nearshore areas of the lake is really the key to all of this. All right, thank you.
Our next speaker is Steve King. He is the Director of Environmental Health here in the Northern Michigan Central Health District Department, and he is here to also give a lecture, a short lecture hopefully, about what's happening out there with our septic tanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I don't know if I can get away with saying what Dr. Luton said. So, we've seen the headlines, we've seen the studies, we know about what's going on into the lake. And this is a typical septic system. And the way it works is most of the solids are removed at the septic tank. About 30% or so, give or take, of some of the nutrients are removed at that point as well. And then effluent leaves that septic tank and disperses out into the drain field. In that effluent are the nutrients, bacteria, viruses, and trace organic chemicals, which would be anything that you flush down the drains, cleaners, medications, caffeine, anything you eat or drink goes on out through that effluent. And then once out in the drain field, it disperses down. And this technology works pretty well for getting rid of bacteria. That's why the codes require so many feet, 50 feet usually from water wells, and then 2 feet of well-drained soil below the stone bed, so that the bacteria is killed and some of the viruses are deactivated as well. But there's some limitations with what that soil can do with nutrients and the trace organic compounds. We're just starting to learn how those are being transported in the environment by the groundwater. And so that percolates through the soil and goes down to where the water table's at, and then is transported whatever direction that's going, and in general in this area it's toward the lake. Our code is a prescriptive code. It's like any other code in the state of Michigan. It's basically a cookbook. You have a 3-bedroom house, you have sandy soils, we expect about 450 gallons of wastewater a day, so you get a certain size septic tank and a certain size drain field. What our code doesn't do, and what this traditional septic system doesn't do, is it doesn't remove the nutrients very well. In order to do that, you'd have to have a performance-based code. There are a few of those around the country, and they require secondary and tertiary treatment of your wastewater, which means that there's other devices after the septic tank where it's mechanical aeration, filtration through other media, other things that are necessary in order to remove those nutrients. And the technologies are pretty decent. You can get some 50 to 90% nutrient removal, but they add on to the cost of the septic system. And in general, probably in the neighborhood of $20,000 and on up to $30,000 for these advanced treatment systems. And that's given if your lot size is large enough to even put one in. For 50 years, we've been doing permit issuance for septic systems in the area, and we've come across a lot of very difficult situations as far as trying to meet isolations and getting enough room to put in septic systems and protect the homeowners well and the neighbors well as well. And with that regard, we've been asked the questions about, well, what evidence is there about affecting the water wells? We know that nutrients go through this system, they hit the groundwater, they get transported. And we also know that there were some areas around Higgins Lake that had some nitrates in it. So I went back and I said, let's look at the data that's available to us. And so we went onto the state's database and looked at 20 years of nitrate results that went through the state lab. And we put that on a map. Now, this data is not perfect because it's voluntary samples that were done by homeowners. So there was no requirement that people sample wells, no requirement that they sample brand new wells. And so this is somewhat limited data. But when we mapped it out, I was really kind of surprised. There's 122 points on this map. About 10% of those sites are at 10 parts per million or greater. And 10 parts per million is an important threshold. It's the maximum contaminant level in the Safe Drinking Water Act in the state well rules as well. And it's a health-related standard. If you have high nitrates in your water, very young children, it can displace the oxygen on the red blood cell and cause problems for them. And there's some other health-related things out there that are being researched as well. So again, about 10% are there. The average of all of those samples is 4 parts per million. And one of the things that we had talked about is that generally when we see this, we know that the water well's under influence of surface water, and we include on-site sewage disposal as that surface water influence. And so this is kind of a marker. The same way we look at bacteria in a well. If there's bacteria in the water, this coliform, we consider it potentially other things in that water that can be harmful. And when we see nitrates in the water too, I think we're starting to learn that there's other things that are going to be there. They're just harder to find. They're more expensive to look for. And again, we talked about the shallow water. The data that we had on these wells and the well depths here ranged from 40 feet to 230 feet. And the average well depth is 88 feet. So it's not necessarily, the 30-foot well that's being affected here. The groundwater flow below is complex, and there's a lot of mixing going on, obviously, with this. So anyway, I saw this data and thought this was kind of eye-opening data. So we're going to continue to map these nitrates as we can and keep working on this and try to fill in a picture for everybody.
Now the next guy made me introduce him. I'd like to introduce John Duvall. John Duvall is the president of Fleece and Vandenbrink Engineering out of the Traverse City. Actually, you're president of the whole company now, right? He is. So I'd like to introduce John Duvall.
All right, looks like we're going again here. there's some gremlins in the building today for sure with this technology. But my part that I wanted to talk about a little bit today is on the screen here, a little bit about some of the alternatives that were explored, a little bit about the service area, and then getting into what the proposed technology is to solve the problems that we've been talking about this morning, and then a little bit into the grants and funding potentials. Really focusing on the technical side of this issue more so. That's really the area that us as engineers have focused on. So we've been involved right from the beginning with the townships and trying to help figure this out over the last 3 years, over the time frame that Dave showed at the beginning since 2018. And we started with a grant from USDA Rural Development to do an engineering study. That study is available on the township websites. If you haven't looked for it there, it's there. Good bedtime reading, many hundred pages of data, but that's what we do. And in that report, we spent a lot of time looking at some different alternatives. That's one of the requirements when you are trying to prepare a project. You need to explore the need, you need to explore different alternatives, you need to come up with the most cost-effective recommendations to solve those problems at the end of it. So what we got into, there's some requirements. One is a do-nothing alternative, one is a regional alternative, and then there's many different types of technology that we considered. And so as we looked at it, the do-nothing alternative does not address any of the problems that the prior speakers have talked about today, which really focus on both the water quality of the lake and the public health component of what's happening with the septic systems. This is well studied. Our prior presentations that we've done focused a lot more on the need and the technical, so I'm not going to go as deep into that today, but it's well documented. So what we looked at was how do we solve that? And one of the things to really dive into is the regional connections that could happen. So we looked at the sewer system affiliated with the camp. We looked at the Village of Roscommon system. We looked at the Markey Township system. And if you look at the available capacity that's combined in all three of those, it would not handle 10% of the flow that would be generated from this project. So regardless, even if we used all three of those, you still need a new plant. So then it gets into what kind of plant. And one of the issues, because of the way that different technologies work, is the land area that's required. If we were to do a lagoon type system, it would be a tremendous amount of land area to be able to store the water that's generated all summer long for it to have the proper amount of treatment time to be discharged the following season. There's seasonal limitations to when effluent can be discharged from a lagoon. And so all that winter storage adds up to a whole lot of volume. That's land area and it's cost. And so the cost gets cost prohibitive at that point. That really drives us into a mechanical treatment plant. Mechanical treatment plant has a lot of advantages as well. It allows us, I've got a slide on that and I'll talk about the advantages in a minute, but what I really want to talk about here is just that the regional alternatives were explored. All these different technologies in the collection system were also explored. A gravity system, a pure gravity system where there would be no individual homeowner pumps involved. It would just be pipes right from the house out to a sewer main in the road. It would flow through pump stations around the lake and eventually to the treatment plant. We looked at a hybrid type system where parts of it would be gravity and parts of it would be pumped. And we looked at pure pumped systems, both the grinder system and the step pump system. By far the most cost effective is the step pump system, and that's why it is the recommendation of that preliminary engineering study. To try to do something different is literally tens of millions more to do an alternative other than what's been presented. As part of that process of working through the preliminary engineering report, we consider not only the alternatives in terms of the types of technology, but also where is this system going to be? What areas is it going to serve? And so, again, you've seen this information if you've participated in any of this before, but we really focused on 4 criteria to try to draw that line of where's the boundary of a proposed service area. And those 4 criteria are the depth of the groundwater, as you've seen in some of the prior slides. What is the soil type? The soil types around here, as explained, are predominantly very sandy, well-drained soils that are not very conducive to treating those nutrients that come out of a septic system. The other soil type, where it's not predominantly very sandy, is muck, which is also not conducive to a septic system. The next criteria is the lot density. So what is the size and the density of the lots? Are we able to get enough separation between drinking water wells and septic systems? Is there even enough room on a lot to construct a drain field with a septic tank? On the smaller lots, the answer is, as you heard from Mr. King, that's very difficult to do in a lot of cases. And in some cases, it can't be done without exceptions or getting easements from adjoining parcels, et cetera. And then the fourth criteria is the proximity to the lake. Some of these conditions exist farther away from the lake, but they drop off. The lot sizes tend to get bigger. The depth of the groundwater tends to get farther, which allows that effluent water to have more contact time with the soil before it gets to the groundwater table, therefore allowing a little bit further natural treatment. This slide, is on here to really help explain one of the differences of this program versus programs that happen in a lot of other communities. This heavy red line, let me get the pointer here. This heavy red line delineates an important distinction here. So as this system, the way it's proposed, the tank, the pumping system, and the line out to the pipe that's going to be in the road are all going to be part of the utility authority system. They will do all of the maintenance of that. They will come in and clean and inspect this tank. They'll do the tank pump outs. All the construction will be handled for the whole system by the authority. Where this says property owner responsibility, what we're really talking about is the cost of the improvement will be a homeowner responsibility. It'll be facilitated as part of the project. However, it's really simply this power supply from the home, a standard 120 volt power supply that needs to come through the outside wall of the house, and then the project's contractor will take it from there. And this last bit of pipe from the house to the tank. In a normal, I'll say normal situation, what would happen is that the utility authority would come and bury the pipe down the road. Everything on the property would be at the additional cost of the homeowner. So the authority has really made it clear that they want to push that line as close to the house as possible to make this as much of a turnkey solution without a whole bunch of extra burdens on the homeowners. I told you I'd talk a little bit about the plant. This is just some representative photos of what a mechanical treatment plant would look like. Rather than the big lagoons that you might be familiar with if you see any of the other plants in the area, what we're talking about here are really concrete tanks with pumps and blowers and chemical processes. They take a much smaller footprint. They have a lot more operational flexibility. So one of the things that we know about Higgins Lake is there's a big seasonal fluctuation. There's going to be a lot of difference between a middle of the winter daily flow and a peak summer holiday daily flow. And with a mechanical plant like this, it gives us the opportunity to have multiple process paths where we can flex the plant's operational daily capacity to be able to meet those changing seasonal demands. It also gives a lot more opportunity to deal with odors and manage the odors effectively. So there's a lot of advantages to a mechanical plant for a system like this. One of the other big benefits is that we have Eagle water quality testing. The state, when you have a plant like this, the state has a very prescriptive testing program. There is no testing program of what comes out of anybody's individual septic field right now. That water leaves the septic tank and it's out into the environment. This water, before it comes out of the plant, is going to have to meet all kinds of requirements, including limits on those nutrients that we talked about, like nitrogen and phosphorus. There's been quite a bit of discussion about where is the plant going to be. And so this map really tries to dial that in for you. It is out along the highway. It is out of the watershed of Higgins Lake. This is a piece of property that is currently state-owned. There's been a lot of cooperation and coordination with the state on siting this. There's been a lot of input, actually, from residents already in terms of this. We started with 4 sites in our initial study. This was not one of them. This is one of the things that has come up and changed as a result of some of the public processes so far. So that's where the plant will be. High level, I wanted to talk for a minute about the project funding. How does this get paid for? Part of the preliminary engineering report dives into the costs. So the next slide I'll share with you has a little bit on construction costs and project costs. But really what happens is, at the end of the day, there's a cost to the project. Everybody knows that's $130 million is what we're talking about right now. And it's paid for with user charges and assessments. There's a combination of the two that go together to add up to the total. How do we make that be less for any individual? The way we do that is by going out and securing financing, grants, and loans, and subsidized loans where we can. Right now, there's already been quite a bit of preliminary work done in trying to get some of these things lined up. There's been a lot of communication with USDA Rural Development. They are a primary funder of community projects like this around the state. They have some criteria about, what population area they serve and what are the income limits of those areas, et cetera. And what they do is a combination loan grant program. The loan program that they have, they will finance a project over 40 years. A lot of other programs that are out there are 30 years, 20 years, 15 years. So just by virtue of being able to go to a 40-year financing term, that in a lot of ways serves as a grant in that it lowers any individual's monthly payment. What they also do is they add to, they buy down the interest rate. So what we're talking about here is an interest rate that'll be likely somewhere between 1.25% and 1.75% over that 40-year term. Anybody that has tried to take a loan for a car or a boat or a house knows that that's a pretty darn good financing program to be looking at it that way. In addition, they will add grant when they can. Grant is a limited commodity in the financing world. What they do is they target it to communities. They look at the cost of the project, they look at the median income of the community, and then they assign grant on a needs-based basis. So they'll look at what is an affordable rate based on systems all over the country, and then they'll add grant where they can to bring those costs down. There are no promises of USDA grant at this point. There never is on any project. If you watch the news, even locally, you'll know, though, that grants do happen and they can be significant. So, another major funding program for these kinds of systems is the State of Michigan Eagle Clean Water State Revolving Fund. The preliminary report that we did was also submitted to the state. It has already been accepted by both USDA and the state program as meeting their criteria. It's an accepted study and would be eligible to be funded through the state program as well. The state is in a little bit of a unique spot right now in that they had an influx of money over the last couple of years. that has resulted in being able to do principal forgiveness on some of their funding, some of their projects. So where this is at right now is keeping this project in front of those agencies, moving it forward in those processes, and essentially waiting to see what kind of offer comes back from either of those programs in terms of a interest rate or grant or loan combination. There are a lot of other grants that can come into a project like this, whether it be foundations, other governmental agencies. The list is really too long to get into here. The project has already had a couple of grants to get it going this far. And, everyone I think that's been involved has been thankful for that. And, this is, I think Dave Hall is going to speak to it a little bit more toward the end of this in terms of what other things people can do to help this project receive some grants. One of the big elephants in the room is what's going on in Washington right now. There's infrastructure bills. Nobody knows quite what's going to come out of it. Nobody knows how it's going to get spent or where it's going to go, but it's certainly something that the project team is keeping an eye on. In addition, there's already been preliminary meetings with Senator Kurt Vanderwall, U.S. Congressman Molinar, and U.S. Congressman Bergman directly with each of those individuals to try to garner their support to get funding allocated for this project. Anything that comes in terms of grant, simply lowers everybody's user cost at the end of the day. That's why there's focus on that. That's why there's attention on it. It's trying to get each individual user's cost down. This is a breakdown of the total project costs. The collection system is about 80 million. Wastewater treatment plant is about 20 million. We've got non-construction costs and contingencies of about 28.5 million, 30 million. What's next? The reality is that the application processes are underway. Nothing has been turned in yet. There's a lengthy amount of information that needs to be compiled and submitted with those applications. Those are going to go in the winter coming up here, late fall, early winter 21-22. The special assessment process will get underway also. The townships and the utility authority had committed to having multiple public informational meetings. That's why we're here today, before that special assessment process is initiated completely. So that will happen also. We really hope to have funding commitments from those agencies by the spring. At that point, we'll have a clearer picture of what grant and loan offer is on the table from the government. And then, at that point, if everything is still favorable, it proceeds into design and construction that stretches out through 2026. Dave?
Hello, everybody. I have to have a little drink of water. I'm David Hall, a resident here at Higgins Lake. It's a picture of my grandfather. First of all, I was picked by both townships to be on the board of this sewer project, which I know nothing about, but I've learned fast. And what I noticed right in the beginning was that this was a sewer project that didn't have the Higgins Lake flavor to it. It's like they didn't know how we do things here. Go get an electrician, call him up, have him come to your house. Will he show up? Will he come back the second time? That's why this program has to be a turnkey for us. We can't get an electrician. Anyway, this is my grandfather. That's me and my brother. That was probably in 1958. I wanted a clicker. This is a picture that was on my grandparents' resort. It was a license plate bolted into the wall. And it was from the U.S. Department of Health that said Higgins Lake is safe for drinking. Wow. I don't think we'd drink it today, would we? Nor would anybody even commit to saying it was safe for drinking. But let's talk about this system and what it means to Higgins Lake residents. Because we've heard everything from the doctors and Steve King and the engineers on how this is kind of work. But let's look at how this is going to work. We are going to get a complete system professionally installed at your home with your input. Now, this brochure's been out. People have probably seen it. What does that mean? It means that the contractor and probably the engineer will come to your house and sit at your kitchen table and draw your property and figure out where the tank's going to be and what kind of electrical you're going to need. You may want to move your tank. Maybe I want to put a garage in. Let's move the tank over. That can happen. So as far as having your input, boom, it's right there. They'll sit with you and they'll discuss how this is going to happen on your property with your input. That's big. That's big. The operation, the maintenance, the repair from the tank all the way to the treatment plant is covered in what we'll pay every day. So there'll be no out of pocket. And that's the water tank, septic tank, the pumps, the check valves, the control panel, the software, all of it. The work will be provided by the GLUA. That means it can be turnkey. You don't have to call an electrician because we will be there. We will know the electrical work you need, and an electrician will come to your house and do the work. Especially when we talk about the owner responsibility work. And then the piping from the home to the tank. If you pull your tank out, the piping is there, and it just gets connected. If you move your tank, there may be some more piping. Those would be your responsibility. And the GLUA will take care of the permitting. They will send you a bill for the electrical and the piping and whatever the fee is for the permit. But they'll take care of it. The other day, a friend of mine had a generator put in. He didn't go get a permit. The generator people got the permit. And that's how this would work. Let's talk about your property. This uses trenchless technology, and we've seen it going around here. They're putting in gas lines. You've seen the yellow around town, and it's on the side of the road. There's no roads dug up. It just goes in the dirt. I think a computer has a head on it and follows it through the dirt and gets it to where it has to go. We will have to dig out your tank. That's not trenchless technology. But what we do offer is full property restoration. So when we come in, chances are a picture will be taken of your property before construction. So we know exactly what it looked like. And we'll put it back exactly like it is. That's what we hope, and that's the plan. There's also going to be financial assistance, and we'll talk about that, but the USDA offers financial assistance. There's a lot of places that offer financial assistance. But we have some exciting news I'll tell you about in a minute about financial assistance. You know, our health industry has developed a term called out-of-pocket. I still struggle with all this. I pay a premium for my health insurance, but yet I still have to pay out-of-pocket stuff. Why do I have health insurance? In this case, you're going to have, in a sense, a charge that has all of these no out-of-pocket. So when your tank has to be removed, you're not going to pay for the tank to come out. That's part of this program. You're not going to have to pay to hook up to the main. You know, most sewers that are put around, they put the sewer and the main out, and then they tell the homeowner, it's your responsibility to hook up. And those fees can be $20,000, $30,000. I just heard of one in Lake Michigan. It was 200 feet they had to go. It was $53,000 to hook up to the main. Wow. We Higginized. I call it Higginized. We've said, this is Higgins Lake. We're different. We want this to be done the right way. And we're trying to do that. And this is why we have no cost for tank pump outs. We are paying our fee, our assessment, but we have no out-of-pocket. One of the biggest things is no service calls. No service calls. No out-of-pocket for a service call. I don't know where you get this. Go buy a refrigerator or a TV or anything. Oh, I can buy the extra warranty. For how long? 2 years? 3 years? And then what? How much does it cost for someone to come to your house? There'll be no out-of-pocket. Service calls. I think that's huge. Service calls. So what are the benefits? The benefits to our community and to us. We get a professionally installed, maintained, with no out-of-pocket costs for anything in our community. That's pretty big. One of the other things, and I coined this, amnesty on non-compliance of septics. What does that mean? My house doesn't have room for a field. I don't have a tank. The health department asked me how many bedrooms I have, and I said 2, but I have 3. I said 3, and I have 5. And I'm not going to talk about the room I put up in the garage. All of that goes away. We clean ourselves up. This is huge for our community. Clean ourselves up. Have a system that we can now not just have a hole in the ground and have no field. Dr. Lutenton showed me this morning a sample. I don't know why, Doctor, you didn't show that. Is he still here? Yeah, hi. I don't know. It was a vial of sand that he went down 1 inch down in the sand. It was black. The scummy water on top, I looked at it and smelled it, and I said, this smells like the Chesapeake Bay. It was not good looking. You have that, do you have that with you? It'd be good for people to see that. It's interesting. One of the benefits is we won't be putting our effluent into the groundwater anymore. That's a huge benefit. We do it now and we kind of say, well, it'll filter out before it gets to the lake. I personally have driven around the entire collection area, and I look at some of these places and I say, you know what? There is no way the effluent from this person's house makes it to the lake. I said that. The scientists tell me different. It goes down into the groundwater and swooshes right to the lake. That's what they say it does. I can't see it. I don't think that's true. But it's science. Dr. King showed us 122 drinking wells around the lake that tested positive for nitrates. Nitrates is urine. 122 spots. Some of them were dangerous levels. Some were just around average. But we don't have that anymore with this system. The effluent goes to the plant. It does not go into groundwater. Vacant lots. Haven't talked about vacant lots. You know, you have a chunk of land somewhere and you're going to build a subdivision. And there's some terminology about site ready. That means they got the electrical in there, they got the gas lines in there, And that property is worth more than the property that just had nothing. So the vacant lots will be improved because a sewer line will be there and there's a lateral that will be there for it to be ready to be hooked up. So that improves vacant lots. This whole thing is to increase or improve Higgins Lake, not only now, but for future generations. That's huge. But I think what's more important, and I really, if anyone saw me in the bar, they come up to me, it's with the heart. This community is a solid community that's full of emotions. We all have our own emotions. But this is a chance for our community to work together in a common goal and pay it forward. It's the right thing to do. What's my next one? Okay, so, what's the no-cost option? Or what's the do-nothing option? So, if you just bear with me for a second, if we're going to buy a septic tank at $6,000 to $15,000, we're going to pump it out, whether it's $200 or $250 every 5 years, and we're going to assume you're going to borrow this money to do it for 20 years at 5% interest, not the 1.5% or 1.25% or 1.75% we can get from the government. And it comes out to be $150 to $350 a day. You can do the math yourself. And I think if you saw that brochure, our program with no grant money was $3.76, an estimate, a very good estimate. We've worked hard for these numbers. Everybody wanted numbers. We'll get to those in a second. And guess what? The service calls come in. So you on your own, and you don't get on this program, then you pay for the service calls. Every time something happens, a guy comes to your house and charges you and hasn't even done anything. Service calls. And if you don't do anything, we continue to impact the ground and the lake and all that. I just wanted to say something about the USDA and how this process works. First of all, the USDA will say, we'll put in a kitty $130 million. And as you need it, that's where the interest starts. So if we don't use some of it, we're really not paying for it. That's pretty good. The USDA says if you're going to have our money, everybody pays equal. That's the rule. Oh, okay. I sat down with the USDA. I sat down with the guy. I asked the hard questions, just like you guys have. I've asked them. They said, everybody pays equal. You want the money or not? The USDA also decides who gets the grant money. They decide who gets the grant money. Once they get our application, it goes to a board of review. And as John said, they go through the economic income of the community. They go through the population. They go through the need. And they also look for high community support. If there isn't high community support, they say, I don't think we should give them any money. But when they got high community support, that's a huge, huge point they look for. This is how the USDA works. It's tough. Everybody wants their money. And why should it come to us? It's going to come to us because we're going to beat the bushes and we're going to convince them that we have a need. We're going to convince them, they're going to look at our economic situation, they're going to look at our population, and that will help us. So, the brochure had this chart, and I just want to go through it because I saw on Facebook a lot of people were saying things about the chart that they didn't understand. So we're just going to walk through it quickly. This is a chart that has the what-ifs. We've been accused that we don't know the numbers. You don't call up somebody and say, what's the number? It's hard to come up with the numbers. But we did this. We challenged our bond attorney to come up with these numbers. and our engineers, and we went over these numbers over and over and over again to make sure they're accurate, at least what we know today. So this is the what if. What if we got 0% grant money? What if we got 100% grant money? So we'll start with lots with structures. An REU is a residential equivalent unit. It's the terminology they use. Every time you go somewhere, there's new terminology. But the terminology here is REU. So a vacant lot, if you want to just pay up front, is $22,000. I'm sorry, a lot with a structure. Lot with a structure is $22,000 upfront payout option. But what if we take advantage of the USDA and we do the loan over 40 years? What's it going to be? So we can do the math on any one of these times 12, but this is the monthly dollar figure. So it's $72.58 for no grant money. But it can go down to $18.50 with 75% grant money. I believe we had 90% in the 70s when Houghton Lake did theirs, but we said no. And here we are. So how much grant money can we get? And what can we do to influence that grant money? Let's go to the next slide. So then there's O&M, operation and maintenance. $42 a month. $126 a quarter is maybe how it will be billed out. Those things still have to be determined. But $126 a quarter. So the total for average per month will range from $114, which if you do the math, it's $3.76 a day, or maybe we can get 75% grant money and it's $1.98 a day. I like $1.98 better than I do $3.76. So that is some numbers based on grants that we could get, so everyone can get a feel about what will it cost me. What's it going to cost me? Let's go to the vacant lots. Vacant lots have an REU of $14,400 because they don't have the tank. They don't have the pump. The number's less. And there's no, is this the next one? There's no O&M because you're not hooked up. So vacant lots, this would be their portion. 75% grant money. What's the next slide? 38 cents. We get 75% grant money. It's 38 cents a day for a vacant lot. I have a vacant lot. I'll have to pay that. So all of this is based on a 40-year loan at 1.75. We don't know what that's going to be. Oh, one more thing about the USDA. When when it's an official intent to have your application in, the interest rate is locked at that time. It can't go any higher. But if it goes down by the time we finally finalize it, which could be 6 months or 8 months later, if it goes down, we get the benefit of it going down. So they help us. And John alluded to it early. The government is subsidizing this. They're offering us loans for 40 years that you can't get anywhere. They're offering lower interest rates that you can't get anywhere. That's a subsidy. We're being subsidized, and we want more. And we can get this grant money with the community help and the community involvement. This is very, very, very exciting because how are we going to pay for this? And what about the people on fixed income that can't afford even putting the electrical together? So the authority, a board, not the USDA, but us citizens that make up this board that's taking the sewer system and making it fit into Higgins Lake, we have come up with the Higgins Lake Clean Water Fund. This is a fund of funds. Sounds interesting, fund of funds. It's a fund of funds dedicated to support the connection cost of needy residents in the Garrish Line Utility Authority Special Assessment District. We've come up with a chunk of money to help those in need to do the electrical work that needs to be done in their house. Who does that? This money will come from family foundations in Michigan. I can go down the list of names, doesn't matter. This money will come to us with no obligation to anybody. We feel that this amount of money will help 20% of the people that are in the collection area. Again, who does that? Who puts together their own fund to help families on fixed income? We did that. So what can we do to help? What can we do to help? So what can we do to help? We can sign the petition for the sewer project. Why do we want to sign the petition for the sewer project? Maybe we just see about whether 20% can say no. That's not us. We want everybody to sign the petition for the sewer project so we can show not only our community the support, but we can show the grant writing people that we have community support. And it goes beyond that. It goes to our politicians. And everybody, we got letters out here with everybody's contact name. The more letters we write, not one letter, not two letters, every week, every month, shake the trees. That's how we'll get grant money. We can't sit here and say, oh, $3.76 a day, that'll be great. No, let's get the grant money. Let's all pull together and make it happen. I have one short story. Do you know where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in this country? Cleveland, Ohio. How did Cleveland, Ohio get the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Why not Memphis, California, all these other big cities? Why couldn't it be Los Angeles, New York? How did Cleveland, Ohio get the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? They had a phone in. And the citizens of Ohio called more than anybody else. And they now have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We can get grant money if we do the same thing. And we all call, and we all push, and we all shake the trees, because this is important to us. I think every one of you would love to have a sewer around this lake. But there's many of us who don't want to pay for it. The 9 and 10 News came to us and wanted to interview us about this meeting. And when it was done, the girl asked me, do you have anything else to say? And I said, do you have 4 or 5 hours? This is a huge program. It's not easy coming up with the answers to the questions. But I think this board has done a heck of a job trying to pull together the answers to the questions. This is a good program. This is a good program. Where can you go and get something that you have no service calls, charges for service calls, no out of pocket for a pump out? Think about this program being good for this lake and good for this community. And I hope we all agree. Thank you very much.
We're going to try to get everyone's questions answered, which means that again, if you raise your hand, I won't recognize you because we're trying to get through all of the questions. If you have a follow-up question that you'd like to ask, I'm sure after we have the room until 2:30, so you might want to grab one of our presenters outside after the session's over. But at 2:30, we're going to cut this off because we have people that drove a long way. They want to get back to their homes for the rest of the Saturday afternoon. Plus, we're only paying for it until 2:30. There are a couple of our panel members that you have not met yet. One is Roger Sweats in the middle. He's our legal counsel. And who else didn't get up there? Oh, Andy. Andy Campbell. He's from Baker Tilly. He's our municipal advisor. In case you don't know who Baker Tilly is, Baker Tilly, they advise cities and municipalities on issues such as this. sewer, water, infrastructure. That's why we have Baker Tilly here with us today. We have Gary Bartow, who's the program manager on the system. Many of you know Scott Hall. You've met a gentleman, I forgot your name already. Steve King from the health department, pardon me. And our good doctor also. So we're going to do these questions now, rapid fire, and let's go.
First question is, if you sell your home, who takes the responsibility of the loan, previous or the new owner?
The question of whether an assessment gets paid off when a house is sold is a private matter. There's nothing legally that says it has to be paid off. It's a matter of negotiation between the buyer and seller, and they would cover that in their purchase agreement at the time. And so nothing in the law or in the proceedings that will be adopted would require that it be paid off.
Since everyone uses the lake and enjoys the clean water, can there be a usage fee that would defray the costs of the sewer system? Example, boating fee or sticker?
I guess I can take that one again too. Yeah, in Michigan, we have very restrictive laws on the ability to tax. And so unless something is a fee for the use of a system, it would be considered a tax under Michigan law and would not be allowed.
Okay. This next question is, the brochure says property values will increase. Does this mean not only will we have a $22,000 special assessment per home, but will we also endure an increased assessment which leads to higher property taxes? Also, drainage sewers are needed.
So that would be an individual question for your assessor. The reality is that the access to public infrastructure, whether it be water or sewer, could potentially affect your taxable value, which is thus based on taxes. So the long answer to that is, I believe, yes, there is a good potential that your taxable value will be increased because of the access to public sewer.
Next question, who hired the company to do the research and prepare the presentation for this project? How much money or taxpayer dollars has been already used? It says on cost to the residents.
None so far. No tax money has gone to pay for this, no. Oh, yeah, well, we did get 2 grants. We got a $30,000 feasibility study grant from USDA back in, what was that, 2018 when we got that? And also, the Higgins Lake Foundation was very gracious to our project in that they gave Garish and Lyon Township $44,000 each to help us through the application process of the program. And we thank the foundation very much for that. So there's been no personal tax dollars been paying for this so far.
If you have 2 lots, non-buildable, that are next to each other, will you be charged or will they need to be connected?
Non-buildable parcels will not be assessed. The biggest thing to note, though, is that vacant buildable parcels will be assessed, so you need to talk to the assessors and or treasurers at your respective township to see if you are actually considered non-buildable. Just a warning there is that just because you think it may be non-buildable does not mean it is actually coded like that. So you're going to want to talk to your assessor and or treasurer to make sure that that is correct.
And I would just add one follow-up with respect to buildable lots. The townships are allowing people with contiguous buildable lots to join those lots so that they wouldn't receive multiple assessments, so you'll also want to consider that.
Mm-hmm. Next question. How does it work when you have a multiple parcels, assuming an assessment will be implemented? We just discussed that. Is that correct? Are we good? Vacant parcels, multiple vacant lots. Did we just cover that one? Yeah, go ahead.
So if you have, for instance, 2 vacant buildable lots next to each other, you will get 2 vacant buildable lot assessments. If you combine them, as Roger talked about, into one lot, then you will get 1 assessment. But be careful with that. I mean, from our perspective, you have to take that into your individual consideration on what you plan to do with that, because there are rules about splitting lots and in the future. And if you combine them all into one lot and you plan to sell that, there could be restrictions to do that in the future.
And if you have a vacant lot next to your home and you join it to your home's lot, then you would just have the assessment for your home.
Again, assuming a hit on a tax bill, is it for all or only those in the hooked up to the system?
So the biggest distinction here is that this is not tax related. This is called a special assessment, and then user fees when you're connected to the system. Read that to me again real quick. I'm gonna, whoever wrote this, if you want to come see me after, I'd be glad to answer, but I'm gonna guess that this means that it could be potentially a hit to your taxable value, and that would only, like I talked about, that's only for parcels that have access to the public system, that their taxable value could potentially go up. So it's not necessarily if you're hooked up or not, it's if you have access on your parcel to the public system.
Next part of the question is the proposed treatment plant just for Higgins or future plans to include Houghton Lake?
Currently, the proposed treatment plant is sized for just the Higgins Lake service area, but with a mechanical facility, those are easily expandable to take in additional service area. It is important to note, I guess, Houghton Lake currently does have their own collection and treatment facility.
Next part of the question is the entire community benefits, so why shouldn't everyone in the county pay for the system?
Yeah, again, that goes to Michigan's rules about how we pay for these things, and the people that use the system pay for the system. And other than that, you would have to be able to levy a tax for it, which is just not provided for in this situation.
Okay, thank you. And the last part of this question, what if there's no road to the back of the house? What if there's no road or access to the back of the house? I'm assuming they're talking about that's where they want the tank.
Right. What we would do, as Dave Hall had mentioned, is we will sit down with every homeowner, look at those situations, and decide what's in the best interest of the landowner and the authority. So everyone would be a case-by-case evaluation.
Can the American Recovery Act funds be used for funding?
Yes. So there's 2 distinctions right now. The American Rescue Plan Act, which was already passed into law a few months ago, or maybe it was a month, and time flies here, but those funds can be used for public water and sewer infrastructure. I mean, obviously the townships have not received anywhere even remotely close to substantial amount of money for that. The infrastructure bill that's in talks with Congress right now is completely unknown at this time whether there would be funds for it.
We have an English teacher in the crowd. Please review the PowerPoint slides for incorrect words. Thank you. And that wasn't my wife. I know her handwriting. In order to control the costs, are you going to institute a moratorium on new or upgraded septic systems? This would effectively keep folks from double paying.
Now, right now, the sanitary code applies, so, if you come in today, we'd have to address your situation under the sanitary code. If you get to the point where this project is gonna go forward and, there's absolutely guaranteed it's gonna happen, we're gonna work with everybody so that there isn't, you put in a new system and then 6 months or 12 months or 18 months later tie into the system and have to pay twice. No, we don't want to have those situations happen. And in other areas that we've worked in, we work with you and ask if you're having trouble, pump your tank as often as necessary. Worst case resort, we might put in a holding tank for a temporary basis. So it's relatively inexpensive on the short term, and it'll get you through until the installation happens.
And if you are in a position where you need to replace your tank between now and if the project were to move forward, we have provided a detail of a septic tank that would be compatible with both your existing system and the proposed system.
What percent of the nutrients come from the septic systems?
There's been a wide variety of studies over the past 50 years that identified the different concentrations of septic and other pollutants into the lake. And each study came to the same conclusion that septics were the highest controllable source of those inputs.
What are the other sources, and what can the township do for those causes?
Other common sources are end-of-road runoff, fertilizer runoff, and there are programs that the townships have tried to implement to limit fertilizer in the area and prevent end-of-road erosion.
I'm concerned that you are missing the data point that usage is extremely low by cottage owners. 80% are part-time that utilize 20% and utilize 20% of the time. Cost does not seem to be proportionate to the need. Not all real estate is equal. 1 million, I think that's what they mean.
So this question was talked about probably for about 4 months of meetings, and how to best assess on a fair and equitable basis as much as possible for everyone involved. To address this was talked about in the last meeting a little bit in terms of the difference in housing values. The reality is that housing value does not equate to sewer usage. You could have a house that's worth $50,000 that uses 10 times as much sewer as a house that's worth $1 million. You can only go so far when you do not have meters, which I'll talk about in a second, but the biggest thing to know is that housing value does not have any relation to usage. And when you do this type of program, as Roger said, there's a lot of laws and constraints that we're working in, and they're very clear that you cannot base costs or assessments or anything for public water and sewer on taxable value. In terms of the part-time versus full-time usage and the cottage versus principal residence, this is something that is a little bit, to be perfectly honest, we work with approximately 300 systems in the state, and it's difficult to understand because the reality is that a lot of people that have cottages up here are going to be on public systems somewhere else, whether it's downstate or other states or whatever it may be. Without public water, it is impossible to know how much sewer is going down into the system. If you don't have a public water meter, then the authority will have no justification to say that you are using less sewer than your neighbor, no matter if they're there 2 months and you're there 6 months or whatever it may be. So again, it comes back to rules, laws, what other systems, case law in Michigan. You have to treat everyone on a fair and equitable basis, which means that everybody gets charged the exact same unless you can prove otherwise, and you can't prove otherwise because you don't have water meters or any way to gauge the amount of waste that's coming from a particular house.
This individual has quite a few questions, so I'll kind of go through these one by one. Why no E. coli in the current septic discharge?
What was the question about E. coli?
Why no E. coli in the current septic discharge?
As I said, the septic system works pretty well when we have proper isolation And for the bacteria, the E. coli, we need to have an aerated soil underneath that discharge point. And so when you have your septic system discharges into the stone bed, our code has a minimum of 2 foot of dry aerated soil before we hit an impervious layer or the seasonal water table. So on-site sewage systems do a pretty good job when they're functioning, they're not in a failure state for killing off that E. coli before it gets transported away. Not you know, the nutrients are totally different in how they're handled in the soil.
How long to upgrade the 4,300 homes?
The current anticipated construction timeline would be approximately 2 to 3 years. So if everything ran smooth, it would be 2026 approximately.
This question deals with the growth and to address the infrastructure growth. Is the system big enough? If we had to add.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the treatment plant would be expandable. You can add additional mechanical treatment trains to the process, which could expand the service area in the future.
Next question, will we have an option to run the pump on 220 volt, half the electricity cost of 120?
I don't believe so. That would have to be confirmed during the detailed design at your home.
What is the definition of low income?
Supervisor. I don't know if we can answer that.
Yeah, I don't think low income has been defined yet, but for using things from a foundation, it does have to be for a charitable purpose. So there would need to be a low income threshold established for that, or it could be something relating to also services to the elderly, would be the two most likely categories.
This is a comment. I support the sewer system. Should be a concern about drinking water quality as a result of poor performing septic tanks.
A couple of questions on this one. Cost. $1.38 to $3.76 is based on what criteria? The grant money. What are the financial options per house to pay for it?
The operations and maintenance, which is the estimated $42 per month, will be billed monthly or quarterly. It depends on, it's either going to be $42 a month or $126 a quarter, which is the same thing, obviously, depending on the billing process of the authority, which is going to be decided at some future time if the project goes forward, whether it's billed monthly or quarterly. In terms of the actual, the assessment is billed yearly. Most likely it'll be in the December timeframe. And what was the other part of it? Oh. I guess the how to pay for it would be like the operations and maintenance is going to be billed on a monthly or quarterly basis. The how to pay for it is you can either come forward, again, this is all assuming that it goes forward, but if it's $22,000 per RU, you can either write a check to the authority for that amount and be done with it, or the discussion right now, if the authority secures USDA rural development financing, the loan would be 40 years, and the homeowners would also have the ability to stretch out their obligations for 40 years to match the loan.
One more question. Homeowner's responsibility, 20 amp breaker, piping from the tank to the house, and permits. Permits for what, and what are their costs?
2 permits would be required. One would be the electrical, one would be a plumbing permit. And right now, those are estimated to be around $125 for both.
Question. From the presentation information, the area east side between Burdell and Robinson Lake Road to County Road 100, 1 mile, 1.2 miles, 1.5 miles from the lake, 14.5 years, 17.4 years, 21.7 years for our effluent to reach the lake. How much of our discharge is affecting the lake? Wow. Professor, how many years do you have to study this one?
I apologize. I don't know the roads by name that well. I kind of know where to turn when I get here. The study that was done by Michigan State in 2014, they actually calculated out the travel time for groundwater out to about 3/4 of a mile. And so depending on whether you're in the area that has groundwater movement at a foot a day or 6 feet a day will obviously determine that. There are probably ways to calculate that out. It would take a hydrogeologist to do that, so the folks that did that initial study would be the ones to maybe chat with.
FYI, I support the sewer project. Why is a step system preferred?
Well, as John had mentioned, we had looked at the gravity system, the grinder pump system, and the step system. And based on previous studies and cost analysis, as the step system is more economical and less maintenance is involved with the step system over a grinder system.
Next question, will GLUA cover the cost of running a liquid line from the homeowner's tank to the main line?
Yes, yes, the lateral from the step tank to the main line would be covered under the project.
How long will the homeowners have to tie into the new sewer system?
What we'll do as part of the project is we'll go into areas, certain areas, and then the utility authority will issue a notice of connection, and typically we'll give those people 6 to 9 months to connect so that they can get it scheduled for installation. So it'll depend on where it is in relationship to the wastewater treatment plant and what mainline sewers have been installed.
This question is for Mr. Duvall. On what date did you meet with the existing Houghton Lake Utility Authority?
We had a phone conversation and recorded data to get information on the existing operating conditions to evaluate the existing available capacity from that utility authority.
Next question. How will we know when the solids need to be pumped? By odor, by backup, or gas explosion?
Yeah. As part of the operations and maintenance of the system, the authority would routinely check the depth of the solids to evaluate when those need to be removed. And then there's also a high level alarm in the tank if the water level were to reach a certain level, if the pump were malfunctioning, and at that time the authority would come out and address the situation.
Mr. King, why are septic tanks and well specs so inadequate?
You know, our septic systems have been used for decades, and the isolation distances have been kind of calculated based on research over the past. The one part that is somewhat new is the density, and we're seeing that, you know, a house on 40 acres has little impact, measurable impact in that area because of dilution. And when you start putting so many homes in a concentrated area, there's only so much dilution that can happen, and you wind up having measurable effects. So.
Next. What is the legal requirement to install this system?
Yeah, under Michigan law, the local municipalities can adopt an ordinance that requires anybody within 200 feet to connect to the system. And it is also commonly a requirement of rural development to get the 40-year funding. They would also require that requirement.
Here's a good one. What is the confidence internal p-value and r squared that phosphorus is increasing, and how long until unsafe value? Don't look at me. No, I'd rather not. I'd rather just take it off the. I'd just rather take it off the card. How about this one? The box plot slide from Dr. Lutton's presentation did not suggest a statistically significant trend in phosphorus values, particularly the right-hand side.
So the box plot, that was generated by the folks at Michigan State that had done the 2014 and 2018 study. And those were the average values of phosphorus that were measured for all their sites for those particular dates around the lake. I think they had 22 different sites. They have the data for all the individual sites in the report. I don't think that they've done a regression analysis to show that there's a R squared 0.9959 R squared value, but it's certainly the trend is upwards since the 1995 study that was done by USGS, the Minerik study. So I think it's the trend is pretty clear. And kind of go back to the previous question about how do we know when it's an issue. Well, we've seen the result of where we are currently with the levels of phosphate and phosphorus that are already in the lake. The issue of the dark sediment, you go to the lake and you walk on that nice sort of tan, brown, yellow sand that's on the surface. You dig just a little bit below that, and it's anaerobic, and there are several chemical reactions that are occurring. Some are mediated by bacteria. Some are just natural chemical reactions that occur. The key is, and Dave mentioned this, when you smell it, it has a pretty peculiar odor. And when I was on the lake back in July and early August, there were several locations around the lake that exhibited exactly those kinds of trends in the sediments, to the point where disturbing the sediments, you can smell the sewer in the sand. That's kind of the point where the lake is. That sewer has the effluent from the waste from the septic tanks has traveled to the point now that it's permeating. It's called interstitial flow. It's the flow that comes in through the sediments into the sediment of the lake, directly into the lake. And so it's reached the point where you can smell the sewer in the sand by disturbing the sediments. And I think there was a question about where did I get that sample. That was one location. There are several locations around the lake. That one particular sample that I got yesterday when I was out doing some work is from the north side of the lake. The other question that Steve, the risk of the nitrates and the distant, why are our current septics and water well systems regulations not adequate? I think the key point to take away from the data that Steve showed, that 10% of the 120 drinking supplies that were tested are above or at 10 milligrams per liter. That's the EPA drinking water standard. That's the point that historically has been identified as being unhealthy and unsafe for human consumption. Nitrate nitrogen competes with oxygen for binding sites on hemoglobin. hemoglobin being the chemical that transports oxygen and CO2 around your body. Because nitrate has oxygens attached to it, it binds to your hemoglobin, so it deprives your physiology from having enough oxygen for metabolism. For older folks like myself, it's not quite as dangerous. The real risk is fetal development. At 10 milligrams per liter, it deprives a fetus of an adequate amount of oxygen, so it causes brain damage and developmental deformities. There's pretty good evidence now that shows that even at 3 to 4 milligrams per liter, there's implications for health. And one of the big ones is colon cancer now. They're recognizing that there may be a link between nitrate concentrations below the EPA level for various cancers. So we've reached that point in the system. It might not be your septic tank that's affecting your well. It might be a septic tank a mile away. And if I can, the previous question, if you're far from the lake, some number of years, you can calculate this out. If you're in the watershed, your septic effluent will, at some point, if it hasn't already, reach the lake. It just depends on how long the house and the septic system has been there.
If I join my vacant lots to our home, will we still get a vacant land assessment? You've already answered that. No? I'm sorry.
No. If you have, let's say, one house lot and 2 vacant lot next door, and they're all joined into one parcel, you'll get one assessment.
Can it later be split off?
Yes, but this is what I was talking about earlier. You have to be very careful with that because basically you're at the whim of future regulations on whether or not you can split at that time and whether or not the assessor will allow you to deem the split buildable at that time and allow that per the zoning of the township.
We have 2 buildings on our lot with 2 separate septic systems. Can they be combined into one system?
Yes, that's something that we could evaluate, again, on a site-by-site basis, but they could be conceivably combined into one tank.
What credential and history does the engineering firm have on this project?
Read it again.
It's like how long have you been working on the project?
What, I think they want to know about your credentials. Are you qualified?
So our firm is a firm that specializes in civil and environmental engineering. We do probably at least 85% of our work is municipal work all around Michigan and Indiana. This is exactly the kind of work that we do, and we've been involved in this project since 2018.
Should we be connected with a step system having enough pressure during times when many homes are empty or closed?
I'll try and answer that question, Dave.
Go ahead.
But the step system, the way it's designed, it has a double check valve at the low pressure main at the road. So it doesn't really impact the hydraulic design. That'll all be done through the final design, detailed design phase, and then the size of the main will then be determined.
Okay. Second part of this, are there any tests showing phosphorus in well water?
Yeah, phosphorus normally isn't a component that's tested for. I think that would have to be a specific test that's done, but no results are available for that.
What type of pipe material is being used in the system?
The low-pressure sewer would be constructed of typically PVC or HDPE pipe.
Next question. The lake has been continuously occupied for several decades. What has changed that has resulted in phosphorus changes in the last 20 years? have it, Darrell?
My opinion is that it's just use. So as the soil is loaded with nutrients over the decades, its ability to treat that has reached its limit, and it's continuing to be used, and more people are up here as opposed to 40 years ago.
Do we have any professional grant writers?
F&V does a lot of grant writing, and one of the things that Dave Hall mentioned earlier is community support. And I cannot emphasize enough what that means to get grant money, is community support. That we can go after additional grant money from various funding agencies, but without community support behind it, it's very difficult.
This is a three-part question. Why are water test kits not being sent to homeowners to check water quality regularly if there's a concern about bacteria in our drinking water?
Yeah, so people can sample their well anytime. We always recommend once a year. And what you sample for is bacteria and for nitrate. Those are the two main health constituents that we're concerned with. So you can contact the state lab for kits. They're in kind of short supply. We're not keeping them at the office anymore. The state's not sending them to us, but we can get you the phone number for the state water lab, and you can give them a call and they'll send you a kit directly.
Next question, can I use my own contractors to install the electrical and pipe?
Yes, that would certainly be an option.
How can we support when what ifs and maybes are not answered? That's why we're here gathering more information, and that's what the utility authority is doing with our engineers and our researchers to gather more information. And as we gather it, we'll bring it out and make it public. We'll continue these meetings.
Why was I not notified personally as a taxpayer of this plan and have not been given the voting right?
Yeah, I can answer that question. I've heard some people say that this is being, kind of crammed through really quickly. And the reason that you haven't been personally notified is that it's not being rammed through quickly. The authority has worked for 2 years to have preliminary meetings to provide preliminary information, and everything we're doing at this point is preliminary. No official action's been taken to move this forward, and when it happens, there will be specific notices that go to each property owner that would be in the assessment district at the time.
Next question, the cost per day, $1.38 to $3.76, I believe. Is this the only future cost mechanism special assessment?
Well, so I think the question is asking, is there future costs that will come up? I mean, the build amount, so of that $3.76, and honestly I can't remember off the top of my head, it was like $72.58 per month or something was the zero grant option, something like that. That is going to be, if it goes forward and the special assessment process is completed, that will be set in stone. You will be assessed, and you'll know exactly what your assessment is and exactly what your potential interest rate is if you choose to borrow and not pay off in full at that time. The operations and maintenance, just like, I'm sure many of you are on other systems. If this is a cottage or a second home, you're on other systems at your primary residence. That is based on estimates at this time. So the $42 per month is based on estimates at this time, and I can guarantee you 40 years from now it will not be $42 a month. The systems over time, the expenses get higher, inflation happens, but the current estimate for the first, right now it's 5 years at least, is $42 a month.
Do we have to have a tank if we have enough slope from the house? A huge benefit would be to get rid of the tanks and create more buildable property.
You have to have a tank because it's a pressure system. It's not a gravity system where a gravity system flows by gravity. So yes, a tank would be required. Now again, as Dave mentioned, what we want to do is meet individually with all the homeowners to make sure that the location of the tank is proper for what their needs will be now and in the future.
Next question. In St. Petersburg, Florida, they have a fertilizer ordinance and has 2 sewer systems. The ordinance allows for no fertilizer from May to October. Why do our townships not have fertilization ordinances before we spend $130 million? Recommend that the boards call in the county and report. Also, septic system ordinance requirements and penalties. Pardon me? Oh, no, I guess it was a comment. Okay.
How much juice, I think they're talking about electricity, will it cost on a daily basis?
Yeah, so the cost per day for the electricity usage is obviously going to depend on usage for the system, but typically it's less than a couple dollars for the whole month.
Is there any data of full-time residents, lakefront residents? Data of number of full-time lakefront owners?
At the meeting in August, the commissioners stated everybody would pay the same amount. Treasure Island, property with dwellings, property without dwellings, lakefront owners, backlotters. Why the change, i.e. property without dwellings?
I'm hopeful. Looking back at that recording, that has never been in the works. The properties with structures and properties without structures has always from the start been a different amount. So hopefully that was not relayed incorrectly at the last meeting. The properties with structures are estimated to be $22,000 per RU. Vacant buildable lots are 14,400. And again, that's buildable vacant lots.
Can I opt out of this project?
If you're in the special assessment district, you would not be able to opt out.
Why are so many homes involved rather than the lakefront homes within a block from the lake? I feel the project is stretching too far out. Many of the homes are not even worth the cost of the project. Excuse me, I asked you everybody to be respectful. Well, if you would give me a chance to read the question, sir, I might be able to do that for you. Excuse me. We're done. Why are so many homes involved rather than lakefront homes within a block from the lake? I feel the project is stretching out too far. Many of the homes are not even worth the cost of the project. Those of us who have proper tanks and keep them pumped properly should not be affected.
All of the properties that are within the watershed contribute. And, you know, if I didn't explain it earlier, an old system and a new system, for the most part, are going to contribute about the same amount of nutrients into the groundwater. Older systems that are malfunctioning will contribute more. Those that are brand new, installed next week, are still going to contribute, whether it's right on the lake shore or it's several blocks away or half a mile away. It's all contributing. And again, it's the density, it's the number of people up in the area, the number of homes in the area that's making this so it's actually measurable.
Will all tanks be the same size no matter the size of the residence?
No. A typical residential tank will all be the same size, but there will be certain situations where it might make sense to use a larger tank, and that will be detailed out during the design process.
Why do I get all the chemistry questions? N equals 122 on nitrate samples with /10% exceeding 10 parts per million. The chart map appeared to represent sample locations, all not discriminating fails. Question, where were the failures less than 10 parts per million among the sampling points?
Yeah, as I recall, there were a lot of exceedances on the east side, but then on the south side of the lake, there's a grouping that also had some exceedances. But also keep in mind too, when we talk about 10 parts, there's the average of all of those samples was 4. And so there's a pretty high percentage that is spread around the lake that is between that 1 and 10, and a lot of those approaching 10. So it's pretty widespread, and that breakdown, that's something that we can extract out and map as well. But the thing to keep in mind, if there's nitrate in the water well, it's under influence of surface water and septic systems.
Is it required to have a tank on our vacant buildable lot?
So the vacant buildable lots would not have a tank on them. There would just be the main line that would be run by the property with a lateral stubbed out, but no tank.
Townships absorb permit fees. User fee for all boats launched and all launch sites, $3 to $5 for 5 to 10 years to offset the expenses. This is a comment.
Can we install the piping ourselves, or do we have to pay to get it done?
The homeowner could still install the piping or the electrical from their home outside where it needs to be connected. They would still need to get a permit, though, for that work.
Question, in the future, how much will property owner be responsible for when adding vacant land to the system? Will the GULA pick up some cost as now from the tank?
Yeah, so vacant properties that are added to the system, so if there would be a vacant property that has an assessment, there would be a credit against the connection fee for the amount of the assessment against that property. If there were areas that would come into the system that are not part of the special assessment district, they would pay a full connection fee at that time, and they would pay their fair share of the capital cost of the system.
What else will be done to save the lake? The new sewer system will not save the lake.
Is this not taxation without representation? Since not put out for general vote for special assessment tax. I have vacant lot in Lyon Township. Road is not maintained by the county, yet scheduled for sewers. Why?
Yeah, so this is what the law calls for how a special assessment district operates in Michigan. Property owners have their say through the petition process, and frankly, it's the fairest way to do this because it's the people who are being charged, potentially charged, that are the ones that have the ability to sign the petitions, and so you have your input through that process. If it did go to a vote, there's not a procedure in the statute for the vote, but if it did, all those of you who are not registered voters in the township wouldn't have a say at all. You wouldn't be able to vote because the voting is just the registered owners. So I think the law is established this way because this is the most direct way to give the people actually impacted the right to have a say in the project, and you do that by signing your petition. If you're against it, you petition no. If you're for it, you petition yes. That's your say.
What about people urinating in the lake? What about the distance from the septic tank to the road? Mine is only about 20 feet from the road. is that going to make my hookup any cheaper?
In a public system like this, it's just not feasible, and it's not provided that you look at that kind of detail. We're all in this together, and those costs are divided commonly across the system. You know, it's not like the person who's the first person down the road only pays for 1% of the cost, and the person that's the next pays 2%. You know, this is common cost, and it's divided equally.
How many of the GLUA members are in the proposed sewer system service area? All of us. What should be done if your system needs to be replaced now?
I think we touched on that as well. There are details that have been provided to the townships for septic tanks that would be compatible with your existing system and the new proposed system.
Question, what if the sewer line from the home is brittle and cannot tie in?
That would be the homeowner's responsibility then to replace that line from their home to the new tank.
Gas and electric utilities need to replace lines. Can you partner with them to reduce sewer costs?
No, that'd be two different categories there, and it's two separate lines completely.
The impact of the lake level on discharging so much water from the watershed.
I believe that was discussed at the last meeting with the Muskegon River watershed, looked at that, that the aquifer that supplies the lake would not be impacted by the sewer system.
What has been decided about Flynn Island? Treasure Island.
Yeah, it'd be connected to the system. There would be a sewer provided using the similar directional drilling techniques for the rest of the system.
Study on description of ecosystem with all the dredging and tearing up of soil, the cost of maintaining the system. Study on disruption of ecosystem with all the dredging and tearing up of soil. I guess it's a comment. Okay. How much is it going to cost the homeowners from the pipe to the house? Say if it's 20 feet away approximately. How much is it going to cost the homeowners from the pipe to the house? Say if it's 20 feet away from the home approximately.
It would depend on the soil conditions and any obstructions in the way, but conservatively it could be less than $1,000.
Yeah. Electric, putting a box or wiring to a box. We already talked about that during the presentation, didn't we?
Yeah, it would just be the power supply from your panel to the proposed step pump control panel.
And the cost of the permit.
And the cost of the permit.
Will taxation happen before or after the completion?
As said many times, there's not a tax for this. The special assessment would be levied and confirmed prior to the project moving forward. The timing of the billing would be coordinated to match up with the timing of when the bond payments would need to be made. So it would most likely start to be paid before completion, but probably not billed until the time construction starts.
Why all needing sewers instead of just lakefront owners?
The can was kicked down the road in the 70s. Today, we not only have science behind the need for the sewer, we also can see the degradation with our own eyes. There's no denying this is necessary. Comment.
On the brochure from today, the REU is 22,000. When multiplied out, the revenue becomes $94 million, not $130 million. Please explain the discrepancy.
So there's a combination in the build. If you look at the build average cost, there's two costs in there. The REU cost, which is the assessment, then there's also what's called the debt service charge, which I believe was $5 per month was the estimate right now. That is combined together, and the major reason that there is a difference is because with the interest on the special assessment, it is slightly higher than the actual assessment. So for instance, if the authority were to get a loan at 1.75%, the assessment roll is at 2.75% to cover administration costs. And then there's also, I could explain it to you in a lot more detail, but there's an arbitrage problem with the fact that homeowners are paying their assessments before the bond payments are paid. So there's always a number of days that the assessments are paid and the authority is not getting interest, whereas they are incurring interest on the debt. So that's why there's a difference between the 2.75 estimate and 1.75, but that makes up the millions of dollars of difference.
Fall of 2018, Scott's installed a new septic with a watertight basin pump alarm, which pumps uphill to a 1,250-gallon double-chambered tank. Can this system be grandfathered in?
I would say at this point, no.
Can the system, or can we run a line from the existing tank?
Again, at this point, it would have to be a new step tank with a new connection line to the collection system.
We were not informed of what the septic tank replacement is compatible with the step system. The township approved our tank as presented. The townships don't approve tanks, do they? No.
How confident are you with the $130 million estimate? That's the first question.
I mean, the estimate has a series of contingencies in it, and we use our best engineering judgment to develop those costs at this time.
Can I choose to have my current septic tank removed or destroyed? They're asking if it's their choice.
Again, that'd be a case-by-case basis, but conceivably it would be either removed and the new one would be placed in the same location, or it would be destroyed if it was in an improper location.
How many step systems has F&V designed?
I don't know the exact amount, but we've done several projects around several lakes. I mean, we can certainly provide that information.
What part of the step system will show above the ground in my yard?
The only portion that would be visible in the yard would be the two access points for the tank, as well as the control panel on the side of the house. The access points would just be flat covers that would be at ground level.
I'll give it a whirl. So why can't we be like Silver Lake and check sewer and ditch this high-price company that's out to make money? Will the treatment plant be used for expansion later? Will the treatment plant be used for expansion later? Sewer bill question mark. How many people total in the study area?
The sewer plant is designed to be expandable for the future if need be. And then the number of users in the area is approximately 4,300 initial connections and up to 5,200 future connections.
What is the current tally of the favor and opposed petitions?
Why do you need the 130 households in the Highlands area, like Mink Drive? They're not even in the watershed.
What are the commercial multipliers for RU values for commercial properties?
The RU table will be It will be adopted prior to the start of the assessment proceedings, and anyone is perfectly welcome to go to the authority office and the township office to discuss their particular situation. There's a well-researched one out there that's for Oakland County that goes through as many businesses as you can possibly think of, but obviously with this area, as any area, the authority will do its research to make sure every single business is taken into account and fairly assessed.
Why did Houghton Lake just do the lakefront homes and we go miles off the lake just to add a house?
We work for the Houghton Lake Sewer Authority as well, and it is not just the lakefront homes for Houghton Lake.
Why do elected officials who are supposed to represent the people not want the township residents to have a say?
What's the population of Lyon Township? The number of parcels in the study area of Lyon Township. What's the population of Garrish Township? The number of parcels in the study of Garrish Township. Number of lakefront feet in lakefront in Lyon Township. Number of lakefront in Garrish Township. My well is 150 feet. My house is 1/3 mile from the lake. My water is safe for drinking. How does my septic pollute the lake? No.
Is it possible to have an adjacent parcel share a tank to help lower the project costs? It's being treated so the county should know it's okay. It's being treated so the county should know it's okay. Is it possible to have adjacent parcels share a tank to help lower the costs?
No, I don't think that would be possible because the tanks are particular to your property and your property rights. That would pose too many issues for future problems.
There are residential septic modules available at a cost of $6,000 to $8,000 per resident, at a cost of 4 watts per day, and seen without having to remove tanks, etc. I don't know.
This looks like a comment. Something needs to be done about lakefront owners that drain the public water for personal use to water their lawns. Removing public water for private use.
When will we break ground, and when will you start the treatment plant? We discussed that. What is the life of the pump in the tank, and who pays for the replacement?
The life of the pump is approximately 20 to 30 years, and the cost of that would be covered under the operations and maintenance repair costs.
How often are they going to pump the tanks, based on what criteria?
The tanks will be pumped based on the depth of the solids in there that would be evaluated by the utility authority.
Okay. And for septic tank to be removed and crushed and filled in, will the septic tank be removed and or crushed or filled in? All of the above. We all wash our dishes, take baths, and shower. Why do I get these? We all wash our dishes, take baths and showers, poop and pee. All of the phosphorus and most of the nitrates and nutrients from over a perfect septic system will flow into the lake. We desperately need the septic system to solve the lake problems. Comment.
Will there be enough electricians to connect the sewer system? Yes.
This is more of a comment than a question. I, like many, love my lake and the opportunities it provides me and my family and friends. Best times of my life, really. I, like many, for too long, have ignored the present dangers and obvious changes to our natural paradise. I, like many, understand that it's not nature but our actions and inactions that will alter the course of our lake forever. Thanks for helping save this paradise. Comment.
How can a township initiate a project that will cost the people without increasing property value?
Who is on the environmental committee collecting the data, conducting the research on the ecological health of the lake? Where can I find electronic depository for the research articles and study results that are being collected?
So I know that some of the information is currently on the foundation website, but I would be happy to send to the township supervisors all the information that I've used to develop the reports that I've worked on if there's space on their website.
If my current electrical box will not allow for an additional 20 amp breaker, will I be required to upgrade my service?
Yes.
Should we hold off on going forward with the project until we know how much grant money will be available through the infrastructure bill?
I think this is part of what Dave addressed in his talk. The USDA and other grant agencies put a lot of work into providing grants for municipalities, and the way USDA works is once they commit that, it locks that money up for a period of time. So they are not going to want to put a lot of time into this area and into this project if it doesn't look like it's going to go forward. So the best thing to do to assure that grant money is secured is to show the government that there is support for the project. And getting through the initial stages of the special assessment process is a very important metric that rural development will look at.
How did you come up with the watershed area? There are homes closer to the lake than my house, and they are not included in the sewer district. Is it because I'm in a subdivision?
It's the four criteria we looked at. So lot density does play a factor in it, soil type, and depth of groundwater.
Question, what is the percent it will help the lake? I don't think we can answer that. Are the maintenance costs locked in, or how long before they increase?
Maintenance costs are an estimate, and they will always be an estimate until the system is built. And just like many of you that are on other systems, maintenance costs increase over time. They may not increase every year, but they will increase over the next 40 years. But the current estimate is to be $42 per month, and that will last for at least 5 years.
Will the sewer project continue without grant money? What is the minimum outside support level required to make the project feasible?
I think the numbers that Dave presented today, were the upper end cost was what it would cost without the grant money. So the $3 and so many cents a day is that cost. So I think it is possible that it would proceed, and that's the worst case scenario.
Here's one for Dr. Luttington. How much pollution is in the lake? Number two, how much of it comes from septic tanks?
So based on the numbers that I've seen, Higgins Lake is dangerously close to the point of being mesotrophic. Going from an oligotrophic system to a mesotrophic system in about 20 years or so, based on the numbers that I've seen at this point. What was the other part?
How much comes from other sources like boats and fertilizer?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have a good handle on the inputs from fertilizers. I know the foundation has been working for several years to encourage folks not to use fertilizer on their lawns. I think phosphorus fertilizer probably isn't used all that much. I don't know how much nitrogen is used, but we're seeing now in the data and the biology of the system that the algae in the shallow parts of the lake is responding to the nitrogen now. There's enough phosphorus that supports a fair amount of biological growth. And so by adding more nitrogen, we're seeing these big clouds of green algae that the individual commented on in their written statements. How much it will help the lake is a hard question to answer. The question I can answer is if something doesn't happen, the lake will get worse.
Could you define your terms for us liberal arts majors?
Oh, sure.
Oligotrophic.
I'm sorry.
mesotrophic
Yeah,
lake?
Dave.
What does that mean?
Give it, cutting you some slack here.
Dave, so, oligotrophic is a very clean lake that has very low biological production because of the limitation of nutrients. Mesotrophic is the next step up, and there's some guidelines that scientists have developed, but mesotrophic means that it's becoming more productive. The next step is eutrophic, which is considered to be very, very productive. Yeah, sorry.
The last part of this question is, who is held accountable for this plan, and will we be reimbursed back if it is not successful?
Are the new tanks already available?
Yes.
Obviously, we don't have an estimate of cost, correct? We don't know the cost? For a new, I think they're asking because it looks like they're going to have to get a new tank before the system's going to be available. So they're asking about specifics of the tank and price.
I think it's going to depend on the contractor that the homeowner selects. They would be able to tell you more precisely what that tank would cost.
Here's a comment. Why should I pay for lakefronts that are the first polluters? Second question, second statement is, why are not all projects in the drain district included? Properties, I'm sorry. Why are not all properties in the drain district included? Well, it's a sewer district. Yeah, we covered that. And where are you going to put the tank on my property? And we've covered that as well. Comment, imagine for a moment if every local, state, or federal project were put up for a vote by the people. There would be no interstate highway system, no strong military. There would be chaos. Our elected representatives are entrusted by us to make such decisions for the common good. Majority, this is how a democratic republic functions. I support our township boards to make sound decisions on our behalf. I support the Lake-wide sewer project. That's the comment.
What other projects is the engineering firm aware of using the STEP system?
We have done several projects with a step sewer system before. Southwest Berry County is one that the utility authority actually took a tour of and got some feedback from the operators.
The final question. Now, I hope you guys noticed that earlier on in the question session, I was picking up lots of cards and pulling one out from the middle because I've been accused of not answering all the questions. So we did so today. Here's the last one. Remember, what was it, Johnny Carson used to say, remember that? I'm not going there. How about considering home values, property taxes for the estimates? Tier 1, 2, and 3 based on location and value of homes.
We cover that as well. It's case law and law in the state of Michigan for water and sewer does not allow for that.
Okay, listen, one last piece of housekeeping before we leave, and I must ask that it's time for them to close the building. I'm going to ask that you get up out of your seats, and I ask that you exit the building immediately so that the school personnel can attend to their things. Thank you for coming, everyone. Thank you very much.